So that brings me to inclusive design. So inclusive design is the design of mainstream products and or services are accessible to and usable by as many people as reasonably possible, without the need for special adaptation or specialized design. And I read that very carefully because it is at odds with what has been said before. Many people as reasonably possible, and that's tied into making a good business case for inclusive design. There's a process that sits behind it, and this is one of several different representations we can use to describe a process. And this particular one emphasizes the fact that we really need to understand the need of the people we're trying to develop the product for, and then do the traditional thing of translating that in some form of requirements that drives the concept development. Now you'll see a different version of that this afternoon. We've been changing our ideas of how we depict the process to accentuate the important factors behind how we design inclusively. But it is all about understanding people. It's about really understanding what they find easy, what they find difficult. And just one example here. David is trying to open a pot of soup. Now he knows that there's something he has to do to break a tab at the top so he can pull the lid off, but he cannot do it, he cannot find it, he can't see it, he can't feel it. So some effort's been made in the design to make it more accessible, but it still confounds many, many different people. So let's talk a bit more about what happens when we get older, and it's all downhill. This is one measure of visual capability, and it's ocular accommodation. It's our ability to focus in the distance and then focus nearby. So when we're young, we have an impressive range. As my optician said to me, "Sir, you're in a period of rapid decline. We hope you'll stabilise soon." Well, I'm well on the way to this place here, which we will all get to, where we have very limited range. So I know that we're varifocals, and that challenges me enormously. I can hardly read the screen here. That one's just about okay, but too small. This one's okay. And the biggest thing on the stage here that you can see is a number here that tells me when to stop. So it is quite challenging when you get glasses to accommodate this problem. And I'll show you a bit more about that later. Hearing. Now, when we're young, we sit on this nice line at the top. We have good hearing across all frequencies. Everything gets worse as we get older, particularly at the high frequency end, and this is what helps us determine speech. So we genuinely struggle to hear speech, particularly with background noise as we get older. Thinking. Now, our verbal IQ, our processing of language, if we can hear the words, is maintained generally across life, through life. But the brute force performance, the processing power we have as we get older decreases. So not only can you hear less well, you have less computational power to detect the words that you're trying to hear. So it all compounds together. We talked about dexterity. There's peak, trying to undo the jam jar, and there's endurance, maybe carrying the shopping home. Well, our best performance is when we're around about 25, and then it's downhill all the way. And part of the challenge here is that children cannot open jam jars, but most people over 55 cannot open the same jam jar either, let alone the medication bottles that are meant to keep the children out, but keep most patients out as well. There's only one thing that goes the other way that we've come across, and that's the satisfaction with life index. So we peak out or bottom out at maximum grumpiness around about 40, 45, and then it gets better as the children leave home and various other things improve. And we've used those graphs to try and understand how people change through life. And for a long while in our research, we thought we were dealing with exclusion. And that's what we were focusing on, trying to understand what it meant to be excluded. How do we measure it? And therefore, how do we encourage people that they could be included by design? Well, the reality, that was completely wrong. It's not completely false, but it's not the main message. What we've learned since is that there's a lot of people who have difficulty with the same product that excludes people for the same reasons. If we fix the problems for the tail, we make life easier for this next cohort and those who are just simply frustrated by the product. And there's a few that might just find things easy. So inclusive design goes from looking at the excluded to actually looking at the majority and how you improve the product or service for them. Philips looked at this and they said that 2 out of 3 Americans report having lost interest in a technology product because it seemed too complex to set up or operate. And that's where a lot of our products are nowadays, at that complex end of the spectrum. So I'm going to show you, if I can, some ideas as to what that's really all about. Now this is a vision simulator. If I can get my mouse to work. That's a standard toaster, as it would look to somebody with able-bodied vision. If we look at what happens, for example, when somebody has cataracts, you get a discolouring, defocusing. And what happens when your toast is burning? Which button do you press? It's actually rather difficult to see what you might do. And one of the things you can do quite simply with this sort of product is to say, well, let's put a bit of colour back. It doesn't cost you much. You maybe still can't read the labels, but at least you know where the buttons are. So there's an improvement to that product by very, very simple means. That's another one that I think is quite interesting, that medication. Most people, well, 80% of medications, I think, go to people over 65 or something like that. And many people of that age have multiple medications. Now, there's a whole lot of different visual challenges that people face. But imagine trying to find your medication if that's your view of the world. And all of a sudden, what you're trying to do is to start scan around to find the right drug. They all look the same. They have to. That is appalling design. There's one medication there that kills you if you take it daily, because you have to take it weekly. Now, you probably wouldn't guess which one. And I'm not going to play that game now, but there is one that if you take it daily, you'll die horribly. So not a nice thing to do. If we take another example here, you may have somebody with vision where they lose the peripheral vision. This is not a very inclusive interface for a small mouse on a podium. If you come to this machine, you'll be scanning around trying to find what you might want to do. And you might find the number 1 and say, okay, fine, that's where we start. If you're really lucky, you'll be able to read the legends on the screen and figure out how to find the right ticket. I got told off by Ian this morning because I bought the wrong ticket at the station. It's too expensive, but I could not find on this sort of interface the right ticket. So it's a problem for all of us. Now, assuming you get the right ticket and you want to pay for it, oh, I haven't got coins. And you start scanning out all credit cards. Where's the credit cards gone? And, oh, there it is. And maybe you've got cash in terms of notes and it's somewhere up here. Now, if you finally find the right entry point for the money, scanning around again, you might find where to pick up your ticket. And what we can simply do is add some arrows. And that might help somebody see that there is some sort of flow around this machine. What happens though if we reconfigure the machine? So you might find number 1, be lucky you move sideways, all the money input in one place. What a novelty. And the ticket's here. Now we can go one step further and we can put the arrows back on. But what's really important is to say, well, what happens when we can see it perfectly? That is such a better machine for all of us to have to interact with and try and understand. And if you worry about your customers parting with the money to get the train, you want to have the swiftest, quickest, easiest, most straightforward experience for them buying their ticket. And you might get it from something like this more than the original. All we've done is shuffle a few things around. And there's plenty of other things you can play with in here. There's the Cambridge Metro. Now that's an interesting thing, and if you have colour blindness, certain things look the same. Now, but there's a very simple thing you can do, and that's just to put the names of the lines on the end of the actual line. And colour blindness or not, you can now track the lines through the graph. So sometimes there's a very, very simple clue that you leave that helps everybody to use the system better. So inclusive design, to my mind, is just better design. That is what it is about. Corded kettles cause all sorts of problems with people with arthritis or dexterity issues. And it was an inspired idea to just convert it to a jug that you put on a stand. That is now the standard product, and it is easier for all of us to use a cordless kettle than it is the old corded kettle. Looking at what could be changed, this is a typical spray that you find in the supermarket. The button to push is at the top, and it's the same colour as the surround. The temptation is to put your finger on the top. Well, that sprays your finger in your face and everything else. There's also too much text on the can because there's 3 different languages there that are completely unrelated. And our estimate is that about 4 million people in Great Britain would not be able to use that product. Now, if you change the top so you can just push it from any direction and it sprays vertically, you reduce the text to make it single language, we can reduce that by almost half. Now, of course, there are challenges involved in doing that and maybe costs involved, but there are usually things you can do with any product to make it better, to make it more inclusive. It's one of my favourite ones from Tesco's. Some years ago now, they added to their portfolio of the standard site with loads of pictures and adverts, just the list-based site. And this is from a later version of that, but in those early days, they generated 25,000 new customers who could not all be accounted for by people who had poor vision, which is what that site was designed for. It is actually just much easier to find your potatoes on this site than this one. And you now have the choice to decide which one comes up whenever you log on to their web page. It doesn't always work as you hope. The controller on the top right was designed to be inclusive for people with dexterity problems. This is costing British Gas dearly because this device, although it's an analog device, absolutely intuitive, easy to use. It's the set temperature for your central heating. The other one has multiple functions on a tiny display that you cannot read in a darkened hallway. It has one button and a dial to do all these different things. I cannot understand it. I haven't figured that out yet. I've played with it, I've read the instructions, I do not know how it works. The problem is that British Gas engineers, when they install these with new boiler systems, are finding that they have to come out half a dozen times or more to reassure the customer that it's actually working, because the customer doesn't trust it. So you've got to get it right to make good business. If you get it right, as with these Good Grips products, then better design is certainly good business. They have done very well out of making inclusive products. So just to summarise the key points, it's normal to be different. That's the starting point for inclusive design. Inclusive design is better design. In fact, we shouldn't be talking about inclusive design maybe 5 years from now. It's just better design, and better design is good business. Thank you.